Okay, so this is a little bit of a sensitive topic because it's still ongoing. But as most of us know, on March 13th, Breonna Taylor was killed by 3 police officers in her own home. The city has given her family a settlement of $12 million. However, the grand jury has recently decided that they're not going to directly charge the officers that were responsible for her death. And of course, we've all seen the protests that have been a result of that decision. So I wanted to ask you if you think that financial settlement actually is justice.
I don't know. This topic is just a heavy one, with everything that's going on with Breonna. And personally, I think it depends on the crime, if I'm going to be honest. So if we're talking about someone stealing your car, or you're let go from your job and it's around some murky circumstances, then a financial payout does give some sort of justice. So if your car's stolen, you get your insurance back, it can do some sort of justice because it can replace what has been lost. When it comes to certain crimes like murder, sexual assault, if something goes wrong in a medical surgery, for me, even though you can get a massive payout, it doesn't bring justice. A lot of times you can't give back, you can't replace, you can't make something as it was before the crime was committed. So I think that this payout, I think it feels like it was given to kind of maybe silence people and be like, okay, look, here's some money, but she still isn't coming back. So I think it really cheapens the life that was taken.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Sophie. I feel like whenever money's involved, I think we notoriously know that money's used as a cover-up for things. So I feel like whenever they want to give you money in light of justice, it's just really like hush money. Like, I can't explain it. So for me, there are certain circumstances, like you've said, Sophie, maybe like something happened at work or something where it's like, okay, maybe the money's better to take in this situation. But for me, whenever it's something that's like a violent crime, I definitely think that it should be justice over money. Just because for me, it's not even about like, oh, things I could do with the money. It's more like, this person we know is dangerous. They need to be locked up so that they're not going to do this again to somebody else. Like, that's the whole part for me. So sometimes, like, when I've seen people sue instead of criminally pursue the person, I've never particularly understood. Like, I've always been baffled. Like, why wouldn't you just try to get them criminally charged? Why are you getting I've never personally understood it. But then when I was looking into what Breonna Taylor's mum is doing, she's still trying to pursue them criminally. So I thought, okay, well then there's a way that you can do it. But I personally don't think money ever helps give justice at all. Period.
Right. I think it's also definitely necessary to highlight the fact that the money is paid for by the taxpayers and not the actual police department who were responsible for her death. Yeah. And personally, I struggle to have a conversation about whether or not settlements, financial settlements, are justice. Because I struggle with the idea that these institutions, as they stand, are able to serve justice within an unjust system. You know?
What do you mean? Yeah. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
With their laws?
I mean, okay, so this is where I'm at right now. You know, when I was growing up, I never really could get my head around the idea of cages for people or anything living. And so now coming into my young adulthood, I actually think I'm leaning towards the idea of abolishing the police. And I say that because so initially those words made me think of chaos, you know, that made me think immediately I'd reject those words. But as I learn more about it, I understand that it wouldn't be overthrowing police stations overnight and freeing everyone from prison overnight. It would actually be a gradual change, and it would be more about redistributing funds towards community-based frameworks for prevention and safety, and it would be a focus on restorative justice and getting to the roots of why people do these crimes in the first place. So it's not surprising to me that the same system, like, we're not able to hold these officers accountable in the same system that empowered them to do this initially. So I really feel like we just need to look at something entirely different.
Okay. And I think it's important to point out that Luanda hasn't gone rogue here. Abolishing the police is a thing that a lot of people are saying should be done at the moment. I know Angela Davis, famous revolutionist, she speaks about these things, and she says she's one person for actually abolishing the police rather than defunding, where defunding the police, at least in America, they're talking about taking away some of their resources and using them into community things, such as, well, instead of having the police respond to mental health breakdown, why don't social workers or social services go and deal with that rather than police? And if we take away some of that money, we can put it into other services who can also meet these, not even crimes sometimes, local disturbances or civil unrest, they can meet these instead. So I think that debate is a very interesting one in the light of what's going on with Breonna Taylor. And I think specifically, I was very firmly at first, when thinking about this, justice can't be met through money. But then I saw an interview that Breonna Taylor's lawyer gave, and it was on BBC. They had a snippet of it, and she was just saying, justice for Breonna is multi-layered. And it made me think that justice always is. And she talked about criminal justice and civil justice, which is the kind of money that's been given out, is kind of like for a civil suit or a civil case. Yeah. And she was it made me think that there are kind of three ways to kind of deal with justice when reading up on this. There's criminal justice, so making sure that people are held accountable. That's what criminal justice is for, to make sure that people serve time or there is some sort of recompense for breaking the law. Number two, reforms, because the point is, even if we locked away these police officers, and we still had the systems in place that allowed it to happen. So no knock search warrants. If those are still in place, it's just going to happen again. So there needs to be some sort of reform. And in terms of the money, it made me think about, actually, if someone in your family was hurt, killed, how would that affect your family financially? What about if someone can't go to work? What about if someone has to take more time off fighting the justice system as her family has? Chances are it's going to affect your daily wage and all of these things. And it allows a family to kind of make up. Or funerals. Funerals are expensive as wedding nowadays. Like, those costs have to be met. And if the people don't have the money, even for the court case, like, the lawyers work pro bono and they're taking a percentage of the 12 million. So I think that there's various ways to mete out justice, but I don't think money is the only one. And to be honest, I can't say, because I'm not in that position, but I think from an outside perspective, money doesn't seem like the most important one.
No, I definitely agree with you. And I think it has to go hand in hand. Like, if it was me personally, yes, it would be great to have the money and I could use that, to hire better lawyers and be able to push prison reform and maybe pull together protests, etc., etc. I could use the money for the other resources. However, for me, it's like, if I got the money but I never got the criminal justice, it would feel a bit like in vain for me. Like, I don't know how to make that make sense. It would just feel in vain to me that there's an acknowledgement that something wrong happened here. So much so that you gave $12 million. Nobody just had $12 million.
Important to point out, the $12 million was given and they made sure that they wrote into it, but we are not taking any responsibility. And this is not because we have done anything wrong. And that's just a button, because I think it's just so underhand. Because why would you pay 12 million if something didn't go wrong?
I've never paid $12 million to someone because I did something right ever in my life. And I don't know if I ever would, because it doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And so for me, that's why I felt like the whole thing, again, when people give money, it's this hush thing, because it's like, we know we did something wrong, but you know what? We're not really going to do anything about it. But here's some money to kind of satisfy whatever it is. Yeah. So I really hope the family continues pushing this criminally and not letting it go, because I think these people really want to let this go. That is what I will say. And I'll say that because now it's becoming like they're trying to move the narrative away from Breonna Taylor and her family to like everyone's doing these violent protests and now we've got to make sure everyone's curfewed because they're gonna like go crazy, everyone in the area. And it's just like, no, people are upset because there's been injustice, and you know that people are going to be upset about the injustice. So now you're trying to spin the narrative. So it just reads guilty all over for me. I can't.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about the hush money situation, because I think for me, I don't think that George Floyd's killers would have been charged if it wasn't so globalized, if the case wasn't so globalized. And the same with Breonna Taylor. It is just because they want this to die down. But it doesn't make sense to me to put the responsibility of solving a problem within the same system that created the problem to begin with. And I think someone just said something about dying in vain. And I just think that we need to stop pretending as if these are individual issues and as if, okay, we can say Breonna Taylor, we can say George Floyd, we can name however many people who have died here as well in the UK, but it's part of a bigger system. It's part of an institution that was never created to protect us initially. And I think the settlements are necessary for the families. And it actually reminded me of the case of the exonerated five, who were five boys in New York who were coerced by the police when they were children and wrongfully sentenced for an assault that they didn't commit. And their settlement was historical, like how Breonna Taylor's is as well. Yeah. But months later, they actually sued the city again for further damages. And one of the men who was wrongfully imprisoned said that once you come out of prison, there are no systems in place to transition you back into society. And we really need to pay attention to that, because if we believe in the way that everything is working right now, okay, if we believe in crime and punishment as it stands, you do a crime, your punishment is jail. But if you've committed the crime and your punishment is jail, should you not then be able to live a separate life after you've come out of jail? Like there are so many studies that point to the belief that people who commit crimes don't have their basic needs met, don't have their basic needs met as a human. But once you're in jail, there are no systems in place that help you explore what that meant for you. And so for me, because there are people who are wrongfully imprisoned, and like I said, I'm leaning towards I don't really believe in prisons in general at the moment. I think we can have definitely better options. But if there are people in jail and if there are criminals that you've decided that you want to put in jail, you are not actually solving the problem, because you're not getting to the root of the problem. You're just moving it. You're moving it from our society into a jail. And you can still commit crime in jail. How does this...
A lot of crime.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that prisons were supposed to be a place of rehabilitation and they're not. And I personally think when you see like 13th, a documentary done by Ava DuVernay, that there's so much big business in prisons, because who's going to provide all the meals and the pillowcases and the clothes and the this and that? And once money comes in now, it's no longer about rehabilitation. It's about the more bodies we have in here, the more money can be met. And I think that's what is one of the biggest problems with prisons. I'm not one for abolishing the police. I think I'm probably more on the side of defund. But I think in terms of like talking about the justice element again, I just think about Breonna Taylor's family have the money. Justice isn't done, but what about the public and the community? Like what effect does not giving justice have on them? Because how are they supposed to really build trust in the system? How are they supposed to have faith in their community? The thing is, no, I don't think there was ever trust in the system. But if we start thinking about, actually, let's start making these laws applicable to everybody and not saying that police, what it seems like, are exempt, then in order to do that, you're going to have to start holding them accountable. If you
100%.
Start convicting police officers for crimes such as this, it will start to build further trust. It's not going to rebuild it, but people are going to start to say, actually, the system's there and the system works. But what we're seeing now, if people continue to process, is like people have just lost faith. And that's what happens when people aren't given justice. And I think that's what makes me so upset with the Breonna Taylor. And at the beginning, I spoke about if someone steals your car or breaks into your home and you get insurance and money, some of it can repay. But a lot of times there are things that cannot be repaid by money, by your sense of security, your sense of self-worth, all these things that crime takes from people. If your car is broken into or your bag is stolen, you might feel like, I don't feel safe to walk down the street anymore. And even if you get money back, it's not going to take away that feeling. So I think we have this preoccupation with money that we feel like money heals all things in society. So if we give money,
does not.
Exactly, but it doesn't.
Because the things that we're asking for aren't money. We're just asking for basic human rights. Exactly. And I feel like there's no price tag attached to that.
Well, obviously it's too high, Anissa. That's the problem.
Clearly.
It's too high.
Sophie, you were just saying something about how, it seems that the police are exempt from being held accountable the same way that civilians would be. But we know that that is actually not the issue that we're looking at, because there was a man who was an Asian man who accidentally shot and killed a white woman. And his story was a lot more accidental than the Breonna Taylor or, how intentional George Floyd's situation was. He was actually in a car and he thought he was being attacked, and he shot he fired not knowing what was coming out of the car, and accidentally killed a person whilst he was on a case with his partner. And he was sentenced to, I think, I might be incorrect, but I think it was 25 years. So that's a brown man killing a white woman, and he's a police officer. So he should have been able to have all of the same tired excuses that we use for everyone else when they say they were just doing their jobs, it was self-defense, they were in fear. In that case, it actually made sense to use those excuses. However, he went to jail. And then you said something about justice being served. And I think this is the issue that we have. We need to reimagine what we see as justice, because we're looking at punishment instead of looking at the root of the problems, because healthy people don't make these choices. So we need to...
I understand that, Anissa, but I think that when you're talking about... Luanda, sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm so in my thought process.
Don't worry, it's fine.
I think
don't have a ponytail today.
It's true. We're wearing yellow. We get it.
All black people look the same.
I'm waiting for your joking, Sophie. That's what I'm literally waiting for.
That was a joke. If you don't know, it was a joke. It was a joke. For people who can't actually, people who are listening.
On the podcast,
exactly, on the podcast, that was a joke.
It was a joke.
No, Sophie's black.
The thing is, we are both in ponies and have a bit of yellow on today, but it's just pure coincidence. That is all.
No. Look, I think what I'm saying is that I think if prisons were a place of rehabilitation, so I agree with you that what the system kind of is doing now isn't working. But I'm talking about, sometimes I think some people do need to be taken away from society from a period of time. I don't think every paedophile, every murderer, every rapist, I think to just say that we're going to keep them in society and just kind of work on them somewhere else, I think sometimes there is a time that needs to be taken away in order to work on them. And if prison was a rehabilitation, if people were being worked on and getting the skills that they need to in order to be worked back into society, I think it would be a very different conversation.
Okay, so Sophie, this is exactly why I said, as I learn more about it, my mind changes, because I had that exact same mentality. Like I said earlier, the first time you hear those words like abolishing the police, it sounds like chaos. It sounds like, what's that horror movie? What's the horror movie?
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. The Purge, when they're 24 hours without any police. Yeah, I knew which one you meant.
It sounds like it's going to be The Purge. But actually, that's not the case. It doesn't mean that if you commit a crime, it's like, well, friend, let's have a healing circle and then just send you back out tomorrow. It's not going to be that. You will actually have people who respond to these things. People who are trained in mental health and trained in trauma and trained in crisis and trained in self-defense, instead of someone just showing up with a gun and firing 16 blind shots into the dark and just being like, oh, well, that black woman body is collateral damage. There is so many other ways that we can do this. You might have to, take someone out of society to heal them, but it's not going to be to throw them into a cage with a lot of other people who maybe also don't deserve to be there. And then when they come out, they're more damaged than when they went in. That doesn't make sense. That has not been working.
I understand that, but I think the time away maybe prison is the wrong term, because for me, I'm talking about rehabilitation. When you think of prison, it has a connotation of bars, somewhere cold, somewhere where people aren't being able to shower every single day. And I know someone who that was the case for, who went to prison. They had like showers like a couple times a week. They couldn't even have it every day. So that is realistic. What I'm saying is, there needs to be some time taken away. So if we're saying the same thing on that front,
but that's
fine.
exactly what I'm saying, Sophie. That's
you're saying the same thing, guys.
I'm saying we're agreeing. I'm saying we're agreeing.
Same thing. But you know what I want to say just very quickly that's very interesting is that in America, a lot of their prisons are actually called correctional facilities, but they actually don't do any correction at all.
Yes,
and I think it's so crazy to me, because there is an idea that these people do need help, but no one's helping them. I just find it so crazy.
Yeah, and they'll probably receive more abuse when they're in there as well.
The correctional facilities are crazy.
Yeah.
And then all the restrictions when you come out and you can't get a job and you
gosh.
can't vote. But guys, we could talk all day about this. We could talk all day about this.
Let's not get into it.
I know it's hard.
It's definitely
difficult to talk about, justice for Breonna Taylor, when the real justice would be if it didn't happen in the first place.